Thanks to Fiverr for sponsoring today's video. If you're looking for a way to improve the health of your soil, you need to know about cover crops. This video is an introduction to what they are, how they work, and how you can start implementing them in your garden to enjoy their benefits. Firstly, what is a cover crop? A cover crop, quite literally, is a crop that is grown to cover the soil. So it's not grown as an edible crop, but instead as a way to improve the soil structure and fertility for future crops that you're going to grow in that area to then eat later down the line. You might have also heard the term green manures. A green manure is simply a cover crop that is then cut and allowed to decompose and break down on the surface of the soil to add nutrients and organic matter. Now, in other cases, very often this is forked or dug in, but this is a no-dig garden. Another term that floats about in this world is living mulches. So a living mulch can be, an example here is this radish growing in between the rows of fennel. This radish is going to suppress weeds, and it's a crop that I can harvest, take the roots and leave the leaves back on the ground. And these leaves on the ground, yes, they're a green manure, but they become a residue mulch that helps to still protect the soil as they're breaking down and feed the crops either side. Now, I did just say that cover crops are not actually grown as an edible. Sometimes you actually end up growing cover crops that happen to be edible, and it means that you can enjoy the crop as a secondary benefit. But the key goal of a cover crop is about protecting the soil, not actually producing something to eat, because it's a long-term strategy to benefit your land. Let's explore some of the key benefits that cover crops can bring us. Now, I've already covered the idea of breaking down and adding organic matter to the soil. Cover crops do this in two ways. Not only if, say, you got the leaves and the stems, they're breaking down, adding that organic material, but also what you want to do is you want to cut the cover crops at the base to leave the roots in. And adding roots and keeping roots in the ground is one of the best ways to build up organic matter. And the more organic matter that your soil has, the better it's going to be at retaining moisture as well as improving drainage. Another benefit that cover crops offer is by having roots in the ground, you're helping to stabilise the soil, which reduces it from eroding and washing away, especially during heavy rainfall. And this is something to especially keep in mind kind of around this time of year when all of the crops start coming out of the beds. How are we going to stop heavy rainfall potentially eroding some of the soil? Well, cover crops is one of the answers. Cover crops are also excellent for suppressing weeds. So when there's bare ground in nature, plants grow really quickly, really rapidly, usually those annuals, those fast-growing plants, to protect the soil. It's a natural response. So if you have some bare ground, actually growing some cover crops on it, or any other crop that you want to grow or even eat, that is going to naturally outcompete and protect the soil from suddenly being overrun with weeds, and that's something we never really want to face in a garden. On top of suppressing weeds, cover crops also benefit soil microbes and soil biology. They do this in two ways. Firstly, if you cut down a cover crop and treat it as a green manure, with the breakdown process, this is going to massively increase the amount of biology, especially bacteria in the soil, needed to break it down. And the second way that cover crops feed soil life is actually the plants directly influencing and feeding the life below. I tasked a Fiverr freelancer to create an explainer video to demonstrate exactly how plants feed the soil. Enjoy. All thriving ecosystems on land have one thing in common. The ground is protected by plants such as trees and grasses, which offer many benefits, such as plant roots matting together to prevent soil erosion. One lesser known benefit of plants is their ability to feed and support soil life. Gardeners know that the healthier the soil, the healthier their crops, and plants are a huge contributor to soil health. They achieve this by releasing a wide variety of molecules out from their roots and into the soil. These molecules are known as root exudates and consist of sugars, acids, ions and other compounds, and offer different potential benefits to the plant. For example, some molecules are secreted to change the soil pH around the roots to suit the plant's optimum needs. Another example is when sugars are traded with rhizobacteria in exchange for plant nutrients. These bacteria also coat the roots of the plant to help protect it from pathogens. Anywhere from around 10 to 40% of the sugars created by photosynthesis in a plant end up being pumped out of the roots because it's in a plant's best interest to grow in microbially diverse soil that allows it to thrive. Root exudates also allow plants to create mutual relationships with mycorrhizal fungi. Unlike bacteria, fungi have the ability to transport nutrients and water through their networks, allowing plants to access what they need over a greater area. For example, when a tree forms a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungi, it effectively extends the surface area of its roots by up to 700 to 1,000 times. In summary, root exudates form the bond between plants and soil microbiology. When plants aren't growing in the ground, the soil is actually missing out from these incredible processes. So you want to maintain as much soil life diversity for as long as possible, and cover crops are perfect for this. Fiverr is a wonderful supporter of this channel, and it's my go-to place whenever I need any kind of skills or digital services to help me complete certain projects. So whether it's voiceover, design, even music composition, there's something out there for everyone. And the thing that I really love about Fiverr is that it makes it so accessible to find the skills or the freelancers that you need based on what you're looking for. If you're working on something and you hit a bit of a skills barrier, knowing that a Fiverr freelancer is out there that can help you overcome that gives you such a good peace of mind. And also with Fiverr, there's freelancers to suit every budget, so it doesn't matter even if you're working on a little project, having that extra helping hand to overcome that obstacle is so useful. So understand that when it comes to talking about soil health, it can get a little bit heavy. And so I decided the best thing to do is to actually get a Fiverr freelancer to create an explainer video to help clearly demonstrate what goes on a microscopic level, because it's really hard, impossible to film that process unless I took over a laboratory. Plus, I don't have any animation experience whatsoever. Because Fiverr is a marketplace and you're looking around for certain freelancers to undertake a project, a really useful thing is the review section, because it allows you to view previous projects that those freelancers have completed for clients, so you can get a really good scope and understanding of their style of work, and then you can pick the one which fits exactly what you're looking for. Also, my colleague Sam, his book The Nature of Food is coming out, and that is something that we've set up a micro publishing house for called Regenerative Press, and the logo, which I absolutely love, was also created by a Fiverr freelancer. So head to fiverr.co/HughesGarden to see the services available to you and get 10% off with the code HughesGarden. Here I've just planted around 50 garlic cloves, and because they're not going to appear for a good few months, I've broadcast sown and I'm just gently raking into the top of the surface some mustard seeds to act as a green manure, which I'll then cut down and let it mulch and break down and feed the future crops, whilst in the interim feeding the soil life. So now that we know some of the key advantages and benefits of cover crops, let's look at the key areas where you may want to consider utilising cover crops in your kitchen garden. So the first area is, let's just say for example you've harvested your new potatoes, but your cabbage or your kale plants aren't ready to go out for another 5 to 6 weeks, so the bed's going to be a little bit empty. What you can do is you can sow a fast growing cover crop, for example buckwheat, during that time just to occupy that space, and then cut it down and plant in between all the crop residue when your cabbage or your kale is ready to go out. Another instance that's really applicable to this time of year is come kind of September, October, you're harvesting a lot of your crops and it's a little bit too late in the season, at least in this climate, to plant something new or fresh if you want to eat it, or let alone survive the winter. So it's actually a perfect opportunity to instead grow a cover crop that you can let it grow, cut it down, and then mulch with normal as compost. So instead of just mulching normally like you would with compost, you're also adding a green manure into the mix to further improve the soil ready for next season. Perhaps you have a bed where the soil just isn't performing, it doesn't feel very healthy. What you could do, and this could be a way to actually save compost, is instead of just adding loads of compost on, which can be quite expensive, you could instead take it out of production for a season and grow a series of cover crops to naturally build up the health of the soil, then put on a little bit of compost, and then the season after it should be a nice bed ready to start growing food in again. If you're growing a bit of a slower growing crop or something that might take a little bit of time to appear, for example potatoes or the garlic as shown earlier, what you can do is after you've planted you can sow a cover crop that will protect all of that bare ground until the key crop that you're growing comes through and starts maturing. At that point just chop down the cover crop, let it break down, and the maturing plant will then take over that space, and it's a nice way to suppress the weeds as well. Another potential opportunity is if you're growing taller crops, for example this kale or say sweet corn or tomatoes. What happens is that there's actually a space of bare ground in between each plant. So you can either grow a shade tolerant cover crop, or you could think about growing potentially, once they have started maturing, more of a shade tolerant edible leafy green instead, just to make the most of the space underneath. One benefit I haven't mentioned is you can also grow cover crops specifically to benefit pollinators and other beneficial insects. So buckwheat is one example. You can just grow it, let it flower, and then cut it down. Two others that spring to mind are also phacelia and mustard. Yes, it might actually reduce their effect on improving the soil as much, but if you're wanting to help the pollinators and cover a bit of ground, think about how cover crops could come into that equation. There is another use of cover crops that I need to look into a little bit more, and it's called tillage cover crops. Now don't get put off by the name. The idea is that if you've got hard compact soil you can grow certain things that can help break it apart, and I've seen benefits and some apprehensions of this, but I'll just show you an example here. This is daikon radish, and you can see the depth here, just how deep that taproot is going in to penetrate the soil and break it apart, adding air into the soil when you pull it out. So this is a potential thing to think about. If you've got really hard ground, what cover crops could you grow to help actually loosen the soil a little bit and also get something you can eat? Whilst there are so many uses of cover crops, there's one particular challenge that no-dig or no-till growers face, and that's the actual termination of cover crops. This buckwheat, yeah, it's gone maybe a little bit over, but I honestly don't mind too much. To terminate it, you just cut it at the base like so, and it's gonna just come and break down and die off. But there's a lot of cover crop varieties out there, such as say rye, where if you cut it down like this to terminate it, it's just going to keep on growing back. So there's a lot of great channels out there that give a lot of information. Some of the best cover crop videos are on the No-Till Growers channel, and there's two key ways of terminating crops on a no-till or no-dig setup. The first is, as I showed here, is cutting down at the base. The second is by crimping, so you're adding a weight and you're effectively squashing, and then it won't grow back. And then a lesser one is actually letting it get killed off by winter. For example, some winter peas, if it's a really cold winter, they'll then get killed off, die down on the surface. Whilst there is that challenge of terminating certain cover crops with no dig, there's a few types of cover crops that are specifically suited to a no dig setup where you just chop or let them die back naturally. So the first is the legume family. This includes field beans and field peas, almost any spare peas that you have left over, and also vetch. What you do is you sow these and let these grow, and just before they start flowering, you cut them at the base, and they're going to fix nitrogen. However, I wouldn't recommend growing legumes in high quality soil because plants can be a bit lazy. If all the nutrients are already given to them, they don't need to fix nitrogen. So if you've got poor quality soil and you need nitrogen, that is where legumes would work really well. Next is buckwheat. This I'm growing for saving seed, but if you use it as a cover crop, it's usually ready to terminate around 35 to 40 days after sowing. So it's really quick to grow. And what it also does is it helps to make phosphorus and calcium more plant available for the next crop. And it's perfect for small spaces. Just a quick congratulations to the 2 winners for the Hughes Garden contest. I've sent an email to let you know, and for the rest of you who did enter but were unlucky this time, there's also a little something in an email for you as well. Phacelia, which I've got here, is another great cover crop. It's pretty good in terms of cold tolerance, especially for this kind of climate. Now, it's a high biomass plant, so if you're looking at adding a lot of organic matter, this is a perfect cover crop for that. And one of my favourite things about Phacelia is the benefits it offers for pollinators as well. Mustard is a fast-growing, high biomass cover crop that offers other benefits for pollinators. It's great at nutrient scavenging, and also because it grows so quickly and so densely, it's fantastic at reducing weed pressure. The element of cover crops that excites me the most as a gardener is their potential to save money and reduce costs in the garden. If my dependency is less on, say, compost, and cover crop seeds, when you get them from the right places, are extremely cheap, because usually they're sold in the tens or the hundreds of kilos, so we can capitalize on that opportunity as growers. So this is just the very start. I'm properly getting into the subject after this first season, but I just wanted to share some thoughts and introduce the subject as kind of succinctly as possible. I think if there's one thing for you to take away from this video is, firstly, don't start planting cover crops everywhere, because each type has certain benefits, and it's important to identify what you want to happen to that particular space and then look at where the cover crops can help you achieve that target. If you have any questions or thoughts surrounding cover crops, I'd love to hear them down below in the comment section. And also thanks again to Fiverr for sponsoring today's video. So be sure to check out the services available to you at fiverr.co/HughesGarden and enjoy 10% off with the code HughesGarden. And I'll see you again very soon.